The Poetry Center, bringing poetry to Paterson since 1980 at Passaic County Community College.
All right, everyone. Good afternoon, and welcome to the Passaic County Community College Poetry Center. I'm the new director, Christine Redmond-Waldeyer, and I'm honored to be here with you today. I want to begin in acknowledging the extraordinary work of Maria Mazziata-Gillen, whose vision built this center into a nationally respected home for poetry. She's right here. I also want to recognize the late Dr. Stephen Rose, who was the former president of PCCC, and Dr. Jacqueline Kniebe for their support of the center, and thank the New Jersey State Council on the Arts for their continued partnership with us. We are sorry that Jose Antonio Rodriguez could not join us today due to unexpected travel issues. However, it is my great pleasure to introduce our main reader, Richard Blanco. Richard was selected by President Obama as the 5th Presidential Inaugural Poet in U.S. history. Yeah. Richard was the youngest, the first Latinx, immigrant, and gay person to serve in that role. In 2023, Richard was awarded the National Humanities Medal by President Biden from the National Endowment for the Humanities. Yeah. He was born in Madrid to Cuban exile parents and raised in Miami in a working-class family. His personal negotiation of cultural identity and the universal themes of place and belonging characterize Blanco's many collections of poetry, including his most recent Homeland of My Body, which reassesses traditional notions of home as strictly a geographical, tangible place that merely exists outside us, but rather within us. He has also authored the memoirs For All of Us, One Today, An Inaugural Poet's Journey, and The Prince of Los Cocuyos, a Miami childhood. Richard has received numerous awards, including the Agnes Starrett Poetry Prize, the Pan American Beyond Margins Award, the Paterson Poetry Prize, and the Lambda Prize for memoir. He was a Woodrow Wilson Fellow and has received numerous honorary degrees. Currently, he serves as an education ambassador for the Academy of American Poets and is an associate professor at Florida International University. In April, Richard was appointed the first ever poet laureate of Miami-Dade County. So welcome, Richard Blanco.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks, Christine. Thanks, Maria, of course, for creating this, and thank you for carrying, passing the torch or whatnot. Such a great institution here. So glad to be back. I think this is either my 4th or maybe my 5th time. So, big fan. And I was thinking about how many greats have graced this stage that I remember reading here with Patricia Smith one time, right? What an incredible institution. So, anyway, thank you for this on behalf of all poets everywhere. They say that every poet is in some ways writing one poem of their life. And what that means figuratively, of course, is that there's usually some big question, right? Some central question that sort of haunts us or comes to be in us, probably usually at an early age. And our entire body of work is in some ways an attempt to I wouldn't say answer that question, because art isn't about answering things, it's about keeping questioning things. But our poems are, in a way, always revolving around that question, thinking about what that means, how it evolves as we change. And for me, that question comes down to one word, and it's home, and all that big word calls to mind. Including family, cultural identity, even my sexuality is a sense of a place of home, heritage, nationality, community, you name it. Home comes to rest in many ways in me, and that's sort of what my books sort of trace. And so my newest collection, Homeland of My Body, is a new and selected, and And you get to see that, right? How home has, the idea of home, or my concerns about home have changed over time. So I've taken, since this is new and selected, I've taken to reading some oldie but goldies, hopefully, and sort of taking you again on that journey that book does through various selections of older poems from different collections. Anyway, that question, that obsession of home, I always like to say probably began in me before I was even born. I was, as I like to say, made in Cuba, assembled in Spain, and imported to the United States. So my mom left Cuba 7 months pregnant to Madrid, where I was born. And 45 days after my birth, we emigrated to the United States. So by the time I was 45 days old, I belonged to 3 countries, to Cuba, Spain, and the United States, and yet belonged to none. I think that was already, not consciously in my mind, but certainly perhaps already subconsciously thinking about that question of home. And sometimes I just feel my life is scripted. So my very first creative writing assignment in graduate school, we read some Ginsberg, some Frost, and some Whitman, and the assignment was write a poem about America. And I thought, what America are these guys talking about? But it opened up this wellspring of those questions I didn't even really know I had. So I went home and penned down, I was like, I don't know about this poetry business, but I thought, what's the most American thing I can write about it? And I thought about writing about Thanksgiving. So, but not the Thanksgiving you would think. And this became the very first poem in that class. It became the very first poem in the very first book that sort of set me on that trajectory of investigating the question of home. So all you need to know for this poem is that for Cubans, pork is not the other white meat; it's the only meat. We still don't get Thanksgiving. Latinos in general still don't get Thanksgiving. We call it San-giving, like San Francisco or San Ignacio. And there's a reference here to, obviously, the Bay of Pigs, which we're not in 5th grade, so I don't need to explain that ancient history. So here it is. I titled it America. Make sure I got all the pages here. Yeah. America. Although Tia Miriam boasted she discovered at least half a dozen uses for peanut butter, topping for guava shells and syrup, butter substitute for Cuban toast, hair conditioner and relaxer, Mama never knew what to make of the monthly 5-pound jars handed out by the immigration department until my friend Jeff mentioned jelly. There was always pork, though, for every birthday and wedding, whole ones on Christmas and New Year's Eves, even on Thanksgiving Day. Pork, fried, broiled, or crispy skin roasted, as well as cauldrons of black beans, fried plantain chips, and yuca con mojito. These items required a special visit to Antonio's Mercado on the corner of 8th Street, where men in guayaberas stood in Senate blaming Kennedy for everything. Ese hijo de puta. The bile of Cuban coffee and cigar residue filling the creases of their wrinkled lips, clinging to one another's lies of lost wealth, ashamed and empty as hollow trees. By 7, I had grown suspicious. We were still here. Overheard conversations about returning to Cuba had grown wistful and less frequent. I spoke English. My parents didn't. We didn't live in a two-story house with a maid or a wood panel station wagon or vacation camping in Colorado. None of the girls in my family had hair of gold. None of my brothers or cousins were named Greg, Peter, or Marcia. We were not the Brady Bunch. And none of the black and white characters on Donna Reed or the Dick Van Dyke Show were named Guadalupe, Lázaro, or Mercedes. Patty Duke's family wasn't like us either. They didn't have pork on Thanksgiving. They ate turkey with cranberry sauce. They didn't have yuca. They had yams, like the Diddles Pilgrims that I colored in class. So a week before Thanksgiving, I explained to my abuelita about the Indians and the Mayflower, how Lincoln set the slaves free. I explained to my parents about the Purple Mountain's majesty, 1 if by land, 2 if by sea, the cherry tree, the Tea Party, the amber waves of grain, the masses yearning to be free, liberty and justice for all, till finally they agreed this Thanksgiving we would have turkey, as well as pork. Abuelita prepared the poor fowl as if committing an act of treason, faking her enthusiasm for my sake. Mama set a frozen pumpkin pie in the oven and prepared candied yams following instructions. I had to translate from the marshmallow bag. The table was arrayed with gladiolas. The plattered turkey loomed at the center in plastic silver from Woolworths. I uttered a bilingual blessing, and the turkey was passed around like a game of Russian roulette. Dry, Teoberto complained, and proceeded to drown the lean slices with pork fat drippings and cranberry jelly, la mierda roja esa, as he called it. Faces fell when Mama presented her okra pie. Pumpkin, calabaza, was a home remedy for ulcers, not a dessert. Tia Maria made 3 rounds of Cuban coffee, then Abuela and Pepe cleared the living room furniture, put on a Celia Cruz LP, and the entire family began to merengue over the linoleum of our apartment, sweating rum and coffee. Sweating rum and coffee, until they remembered it was already 1976 and 46 degrees in America. Thank you. So, that was obviously sort of a childhood point of view poem. But again, like I said, this question continues throughout my life. And in particular as regards my mother. My mother left her entire family behind in Cuba. Her 8 brothers and sisters, her parents, every aunt and uncle, every niece and nephew, every cousin. And we always sort of grew up, I grew up literally with half a family, half a huge family. But we, grew up with that sense of loss and longing that my mother had. But then I also started rethinking about that in the way that, as I like to say, my mother is more of an American than I could ever be, for that leap of faith and all she abandoned for the sake of the promises and the dreams of this country for not only herself, but of course for me and my brother. And so I realized that her story was, again, one of great patriotism, or at least great faith. And so when the White House asked me to write the inaugural poem, they actually asked me to write 3 poems, and this was the 3rd poem. The president picked the one that I read, obviously, but this one focuses on my mother, and I guess it asks us all to place ourselves in my mother's emotional shoes, to think what that would look like or feel like if we all had to sort of pack a bag in 48 hours and leave everything ever knew behind, which is becoming even more of a possibility these days through the built-in trauma. I'm going to have to leave like my mom. Anyway, mother country, or madre patria. To love a country as if you've lost one. 1968, my mother leaves Cuba for America, a scene I imagine as if standing in her place. One foot inside a plane destined for a country she knew only as a name, a color on a map, or glossy photos from drugstore magazines. Her other foot anchored to the platform of her patria, her hand clutched around one suitcase, taking only what she needs most. Hand-colored photographs of her family, her wedding veil, the doorknob of her house, a jar of dirt from her backyard, goodbye letters she won't open for years. The sorrowful drone of engines, one last deep breath of familiar air she'll take with her. One last glimpse at all she'd ever known. The palm trees wave goodbye as she steps onto the plane. The mountains shrink from her eyes as she lifts off into another life to love a country, as if you've lost one. I hear her, once upon a time, reading picture books over my shoulder at bedtime, both of us learning English, sounding out words as strange as the talking animals and fair-haired princes in their pages. I taste her first attempts at macaroni and cheese, but with chorizo and peppers, and her shame over Thanksgiving turkey is always dry, but countered by her perfect pork pernil and garlic yuca. I smell the rain of those mornings huddled as one under one umbrella, waiting for the bus to her 10-hour days at the cash register. And at night, the zzz, zzz of her sewing her own blouses, and quinceañera dresses for her grown nieces still in Cuba, guessing at their sizes. And the gowns she sold to the neighbors to save for a rusty white sedan, no hubcaps, no air conditioning, sweating all the way through our first vacation to Florida theme parks to love a country. As if you've lost one. As if we're you on a plane departing from America forever. Clouds closing like curtains on your country, the last scene in which you're a madman scribbling the names of your favorite flowers, trees, and birds you'd never see again. Your address and phone number you'd never use again. The color of your father's hair and your mother's eyes, terrified you could somehow, someday, forget these. To love a country, as if I was my mother last spring, hobbling, insisting I help her climb all the way up to the U.S. Capitol, as if she were here before you today, instead of me, explaining her tears, her cheeks pink as the cherry blossoms coloring the air that day, when she stopped, turned to me, and said, "You know, mijo, it isn't where you're born that matters. It's where you choose to die. That is your country." Thank you. So, we spoke about this in workshop. Oh, by the way, my thanks to all my workshop group. God, what amazing, it made my job easy today. So many great poems are coming out already, but just such great conversations. Thank you so much. Don't forget, finish those poems. But we talked about this a little bit, so I thought I'd share it. I never really thought the question of home had to do anything with my sexuality. I just thought it was, Cuban American, that kind of jazz. And then I realized, wait, when you come out, right, it's like you have to find another kind of home, right? In a way, you have to find another community, another place where you can feel, where people understand you, another place where you can feel safe and live your life without shame and supported, another kind of community. And so those became definitions of home for me. Not a geographical home, right, but another kind of cultural home. And I still didn't know quite how to tell that story, but then I started thinking about what is the intersection of that with my sense of home in terms of being a Cuban, what I call cultural sexuality, how those two things distinguish my story as a Cuban man and distinguish my story as a gay man as well. So enter my grandmother, who was my primary caretaker. She lived with us, and she basically raised me, because my parents were working most of the time. But anyway, she was very homophobic, but she was also very xenophobic. So anything that was too culturally odd to her was also gay. So oatmeal was gay. The Brady Bunch was gay. Like anything that couldn't make it into her cultural mind. So if I wasn't doing something queer, I was doing something American, which was queer too. So it's very confusing. At one point I thought, gee, there must be a lot of gay people outside of Miami because they're all gay, they're all queer. So I kind of approached that a little bit here too, but this is a persona poem, which means it's written in the voice of my grandmother. I wrote it about her, as I was telling our class today, and it sounded like I was whining, and I thought, these kinds of things are like that a 40-year-old man writing about this stuff. And so I wrote it in her voice so she can sort of incriminate herself, but also what I learned from the poem is that relationship was much more complex than I thought, because she actually was a funny, warm, and vivacious person and she was my best friend at the end of the day in her own weird expression of love. I always like to say that there's people like this, at least one person like this in all our lives, not necessarily in terms of sexuality, but that sibling or perhaps a parent or a friend that can't ever give you a direct compliment, kind of like, like, I love what you've done with your hair. Finally. Like, have you lost weight? That one, right? And anyway, that's part of what the relationship was with my grandmother. I'm not sure it comes through in the poem, but it makes me think about that. It's called Queer Theory, according to my grandmother, according to my abuela. Never drink your soda with a straw. Men don't use straws. Milkshakes? Well, maybe. Stop buying your mother's Avon catalog and the men's underwear and those Sears flyers. I've seen you. Stay out of her Tupperware parties and perfume bottles. Don't let her kiss you. She kisses you much too much. Avoid hugging men, but if you must, pat them real hard on the back, even if it's your father. Must you keep that cat? Don't pet him so much. Why don't you like dogs? Never play house, even if you're the husband, and quit hanging out with that Henry kid. He's too pale. And I don't care what you call them, those E.I. Joes of his are dolls. Don't draw rainbows or sunsets or flowers. I've seen you. Don't draw at all. No coloring books either. Put away your crayons, your Play-Doh, your Legos. Where are your Hot Wheels, your laser gun and handcuffs? Those knives I gave you last Christmas. Never fly a kite or roller skate, but light all the firecrackers you want. Kill all the lizards you can. Cut up worms and feed them to that cat of yours. Don't sit Indian style with your legs crossed. You're no Indio. And stop click-clacking your sandals like some Tropicana chorus girl. And for God's sake, never, ever pee sitting down. I've seen you. Never take a bubble bath or wash your hair with shampoo. Shampoo is for women. So is conditioner, so is el mousse, so is hand lotion. Never file your nails or blow dry your hair. Go to the barber shop with your abuelo. You're not unisex, are you? Stay out of the kitchen. Los hombres don't cook. They eat. Eat anything you want, except deviled eggs, blow pops, croissants, bagels, maybe, cucumber sandwiches, and those little petite fours. Don't watch Bewitched or I Dream of Jeannie. Don't stare at the $6 million man. I've seen you. Never dance alone in your room. Donna Summer, Barry Manilow, The Captain, and Tennille, Bette Midler, and all musicals forbidden. Posters of kittens, Star Wars, or the Eiffel Tower, forbidden. Those fancy books on architecture and art, I threw them in the trash. No, you can't wear cologne or puka shells. And I better not catch you in clogs. If you grow a ponytail, I'll cut it off. What? No, you can't pierce your ear, left or right side. I don't care. You will not look like a goddamn queer. I've seen you, even though I know you are one. So there's a strange kind of love there, right? Like, she knew it was coming down the pike. She just sort of wanted to protect me by butching me up somehow for that generation. So in that quest for home, eventually I went to Cuba for the first time. I say I returned to Cuba because it felt like a returning because of all the stories and photographs and whatnot and letters. And that was an amazing experience. You can imagine it was like sort of this pictures book of your life and then coming to life, you know. And because Cuba, unfortunately, because of economic circumstances, yes, things are falling apart, but your grandfather's little old farmhouse is still there. It's not a shopping center. So it's like a time warp where you still see 1950s cars. So it's like almost like going back in time. And that felt great, but it also made me realize that there was also a very big part of me on the other side of the hyphen called American that I hadn't explored either. And while I loved Cuba, it was more the Cuba of my mind. It was more the Cuba of my parents that I was needed to sort of fill in those blanks. So I left the Republic of Miami, and as we like to say, we like to live in Miami because it's so close to the United States. And I took left living on Miami Beach to Hartford, Connecticut, chasing that American stereotypic, overly romanticized version that was still in my head, you know, writing, you know, sleigh rides in the snow and a one-horse hope and say, you know, pilgrims, those pilgrim shoes, and me and Martha Stewart doing arts and crafts. And of course, that's not exactly what happened. And I started traveling a lot, again, with that same question. And all these sort of became books, right? I started traveling a lot with that same question of home. Well, it's not this Cuba, I thought. It's not this America, I thought. Maybe home is Barcelona or Venice or London. And thinking about that question, thinking about home in a more cosmopolitan way. And that never quite worked out either. And I came across this quote by Pascal that says, "The sole cause of a man's unhappiness is that he does not know how to stay quietly in his room." And I interpret that to think, well, what is that room I left? Has this chasing home been a wild goose chase? And so I decided the only place I really belonged was back in South Florida, Miami. And I moved back there after 8 or 10 years. Thinking I could just jump right into the life I left off. But of course, Miami had changed a lot, but I had changed a lot too. So this poem sort of speaks to to a couple of adages, but one is, you don't know what you got till you lose it. But also, you can't go back home, right? At least not in the ways that we think we can. I wrote initially this horrible poem that my husband said, "That's the worst poem you've ever written." And I said, "No, it's not. It says exactly what I wanted to say." And so I was ranting and raving in the poem. He's just like, "You sound like your mother." And I was like, and then I realized that it was just in the ways that my parents used to talk about Cuba, like, how dare they, and this changed, and they changed, like, my neighbor's house is now pink, or like whatever, like it was we were like, who cares? Like, and I realized that this Marco Island, this Gulf Motel poem, this is the first thing I really lost in that sense. And so it was like my Cuba in a way. Certainly not as intense or anything like that, but it was that first sense of loss that you realize your lack of human agency, or, time, mortality, right? Things change. But again, you don't know what you got till you lose it, because if the Gulf Motel would have been there, it would have probably been, oh, look, that's that dump we used to go to, right? So it speaks to that feeling as well. Looking for the Gulf Motel, Marco Island, Florida. There should be nothing here I don't remember. The Gulf Motel with mermaid lampposts and ship's wheel in the lobby should still be rising out of the sand like a cake decoration. My brother and I should still be pretending we don't know our parents, embarrassing us as they roll the luggage cart past the front desk, loaded with our scruffy suitcases, 24 loaves of Cuban bread, brown bags bulging with enough mangoes to last the entire week, our espresso pot, the pressure cooker, and a pork roast reeking garlic through the lobby. All because we can't afford to eat out, mijo. Not even on vacation. Only 2 hours from our home in Miami, but far enough away to be thrilled by the whiter sands on the west coast of Florida, where I should still be, for the first time, watching the sun set instead of rise over the ocean. There should be nothing here I don't remember. My mother should still be in the kitchenette of the Gulf Motel, her daisy sandals from Kmart still squeaking across the linoleum, still gorgeous in her teal swimsuit and amber earrings, stirring a pot of arroz con pollo, adding sprinkles of onion powder and dollops of tomato sauce. My father should still be in a terry cloth jacket, smoking, clinking a glass of amber whiskey in the sunset at the Gulf Motel, watching us dive into the pool, 2 sons he'll never see, grow into men who will be proud of him. There should be nothing here I don't remember. My brother and I should still be playing parcheesi. My father should still be alive, slow dancing with my mother on the sliding glass balcony of the Gulf Motel. No music, only the waves keeping time. A song only their minds hear, 10,000 nights back to their life in Cuba. My mother's face should still be resting against his bare chest like the moon resting on the sea. And the stars should still be turning around them. There should be nothing here I don't remember. My brother should still be 13, sneaking rum in the bathroom and sculpting naked women from sand. And I should still be 8 years old, dazzled by seashells and how many seconds I can hold my breath underwater. But I'm not. I'm 38, driving up Collier Boulevard, looking for the Gulf Motel, for everything that should still be, but isn't. I want to blame the condos, their shadows for ruining the beach in my past. I want to chase the snowbirds away with their tacky mansions and yachts. I want to turn the golf courses back into mangroves. I want to find the Gulf Motel exactly as it was and pretend for a moment nothing lost is lost. Thank you. I had kind of given up on the question of home. I was living, as Basho says, life is a journey, and the journey itself is home. Moved to Maine after as far away as I could get from Miami, all the way at the other end of I-95. And then I really, I just was thinking, again, living in the question, and then Obama called. And we kind of joke about it now, but basically he gave me my very first, it was the same first assignment I had, write a poem about America. And I almost told him, don't worry, big guy, I got this one. This is the poem I've been writing all my life. Of course, it's a very different poem for this occasion, right? But it's a very personal level, of course, it changed my life. For one, I got to meet Beyonce, and even more importantly, James Taylor. But it also changed, here I was, this working class immigrant kid, sitting with my mother who grew up in a dirt floor home in Cuba. Like Beyonce, like steps away from her, I could smell her. I thought, if this isn't what defines America, I don't know what does, right? And so I realized that yes, we're not perfect either, right? That it's still a work in progress, and I think there's some of that in the poem, sort of a hinting of that, but that that it's still a great experiment. But there was to sort of realize that democracy is not a noun; it's a verb. It's something we have to participate in and keep on it, and we're seeing that, of course, now more than ever, at least in my lifetime. But anyway, all that sort of goes into this poem. It's still a very big question about home, but no longer just what is home to me, but really what is home to us, right? Like, who are we in this landscape? And that's part of what I tried to pay tribute to in the poem. I'm going to read a short excerpt from the memoir that's called For All of Us One Today, that details that whole experience, including the creative process of writing the 3 poems in 3 weeks. In the moment, I feel America standing as one, putting differences aside and taking a deep collective breath. We pay tribute to something far bigger and more important than any one of us. And I truly feel like one of us, one of we, the people, in the echoes of the president's and others' speeches. I embrace America in a way I never had or thought I could, feeling for the first time that I belong, truly belong, to one country. Not an imaginary ideal from TV or nostalgic Cuba floating in the sea of my parents' memories, but a real, tangible place that is mine, was mine, all along. Senator Schumer introduces me and calls me up to the podium. My mother squeezes my shoulder. I stand more confident I imagined I would or could be, transfixed by the moment that is no longer about me or my poem or my glory, but about our country. Still, I'm surprised when the president and vice president stand up to greet me and shake my hand on the way to the podium. They both whisper something in my ear that I can't make out. But their gracious gestures speak silently to my heart, as if saying, Richard, here is your country. This is your story. You are home. So I step up to the podium, look out over the crowd, a patchwork quilt of lives, of stories spread across our ground, under our sky, beneath our one sun. I take it all in as I take one deep breath, and then another. This is for them. This is for us, for all of us, I think to myself, and begin speaking into our wind. Mr. President, Mr. Vice President, America, one today. One sun rose on us today, kindled over our shores, peeking over the Smokies, greeting the faces of the Great Lakes, spreading a simple truth across the Great Plains, then charging over the Rockies. One light, waking up rooftops, under each one a story told by our silent gestures moving behind our windows. My face, your face, millions of faces in morning's mirrors, each one yawning to life, crescendoing into our day. Pencil yellow school buses, the rhythm of traffic lights, fruit stands, apples, limes, and oranges arranged like rainbows begging our praise. Silver trucks heavy with oil or paper, bricks or milk, teeming over highways alongside us, on our way to clean tables, read ledgers, or save lives, to teach geometry or ring up groceries, as my mother did for 20 years, so I could write this poem for us today. All of us, as vital as the one light we move through, the same light on blackboards with lessons for the day, equations to solve, history to question, or atoms imagined. The I have a dream we keep dreaming, or the impossible vocabulary of sorrow that won't explain the empty desks of 20 children marked absent today and forever. Many prayers, but one light, breathing color into stained glass windows, life into the faces of bronze statues, warmth onto the steps of our museums and park benches as mothers watch their children slide into the day. One ground, our ground, rooting us to every stalk of corn, every head of wheat sown by sweat and hands, hands gleaning coal or planting windmills in deserts and hilltops that keep us warm, hands digging trenches, hands riding pipes and cables, hands as worn as my father's, cutting sugarcane, so my brother and I could have books and shoes. The dust of our farms and deserts, our cities and plains, mingled by one wind, our breath. Breathe. Hear it. Through the day's gorgeous din of honking cabs, buses launching down avenues, a symphony of footsteps, guitars, and screeching subways, the unexpected songbird on your clothesline. Hear squeaky playground swings, trains whistling, or whispers across cafe tables. Hear the doors we open for each other all day, saying, hello, shalom, buongiorno, howdy, namaste, or buenos dias, in the language my mother taught me, in every language, spoken into one wind, carrying our lives without prejudice as these words break from my lips. One sky since the Appalachians and Sierras claimed their majesty, and the Mississippi and Colorado worked their way to the sea. Thank the work of our hands, weaving steel into bridges, finishing one more report for the boss on time, stitching another wound or uniform, the first brushstroke on a portrait, or the last floor on the Freedom Tower, jutting into a sky that yields to our resilience, one sky, toward which we sometimes lift our eyes, tired from work. Some days guessing at the weather of our lives. Some days giving thanks for love that loves you back. Sometimes praising a mother who knew how to give, or forgiving a father who couldn't give what you wanted. Still, we head home. Home through the gloss of rain or weight of snow or the plum blush of dusk, but always home. Always under one sky, our sky, and always one moon, like a silent drum tapping on every rooftop and every window of one country. All of us facing the stars and hope, a new constellation, still waiting for us to map it, still waiting for us to name it together. Thank you. So next, since I take a little, I was going to stop there, but if you'll indulge me, since we can entertain the troops a little bit more, and since Juan wasn't able to make it, but just like maybe end on that trajectory of where the next iteration of Home, which became, wow, that question that so many people wrote to me, like tens of thousands of people, like just realizing they had that same question of like, am I American? Do I belong? Am I part of this? Something the president and I also share, like, what does it mean to be an American? And people from all walks of life, and so I started thinking about that question Home in that context, right? Like not just what it means to me, but what it means to us. And so that ended up being a lot of the poems in the book, How to Love a Country, which is, I always wanted to also put a question mark behind that title, because it's like, what is a country? How do you love it? What does that even mean? So it's kind of an exploration of that idea of both the good and the bad and the ugly of what is home, right? And what is a country. And so I'm going to read a small sampling of that poem. And this one, because we've talked about it in class before too, which is another kind of persona poem, but a personification poem. So it's in the voice of an inanimate thing. And it's based on a collaborative photography project. And it's the pictures of the Rio Grande that forms part of the border of the US. And I thought, how can I write about this? Because while I am an immigrant, certainly that is not my experience, with Cuban exceptionalism, special status, I should say. And yet the feelings are similar, but they're very different in terms of the history as well. And I started thinking a little bit deeper about the absurdity of borders in and of themselves, like as if you cross from Texas into Mexico, it's just like suddenly you're in a different country. Well, that's poppycock, right? But the idea of how borders are really set up, as they always have been historically, right, to control wealth, power, etc., and people. So I thought, I can't get that preachy, but the river can. So the river is giving it to humanity a what for. In a way, which is sort of, the river is also sort of the voice of God, so to speak, while still touching upon the issue of U.S.-Mexican relations. But Complaint of El Rio Grande. I was meant for all things to meet, to make the clouds pause in the mirror of my waters, to be home to fallen rain that finds its way to me, to turn eons of loveless rock into love-sick pebbles and carry them as humble gifts back to the sea, which brings life back to me. I felt the sun flare, praised each star flocked about the moon long before you did. I've breathed air you'll never breathe. Listened to songbirds before you could speak their names, before you dug your oars in me, before you created the gods that created you, then countries. Your invention. Maps jigsawing the world into colored shapes, caged in bold lines to say you're here, not there, you're this, not that, to say yellow isn't red, red isn't black, black is not white, to say mine, not ours, to say war, and believe life's worth is relative. You named me. Big river drew me, thick, blue to divide, to say spick and Yankee, to say wetback and gringo. You split me in two, half of me, us, the rest other, but I wasn't meant to drown children. Hear mother's cries, never meant to be your geography, a line, a border, a murderer. I was meant for all things to meet. The mirrored clouds and the sun's tingle, bird songs in the quiet moon, the wind and its dust, the rush of mountain rain, and us. Blood that runs in you is water flowing in me. Both life, both the truth we know, is one in one another. Thank you. Thank you.